Okay, welcome back. We've got our resource management system first up workshop with Vanessa, Helen and Nicola. So who's leading off to start with? Helen, okay. Do you want questions at the end or going through?
Kia ora, maybe, it actually doesn't matter to us, so you can ask questions throughout if you like. We've got a presentation, so if Vanessa takes you through that, then through you, Madam Chair, then ask questions when you will.
Okay, this is the one that we've had already updated? Okay, thank you.
Kia ora. So as you're probably aware, the government is doing a lot of work reforming the resource management system. Today I'm here to take you through what we know about and what we can probably expect to see in the reform of the resource management system, and more specifically, the replacement of the Resource Management Act. Oh, next slide, please. Who? No.
No.
Thank
Staff
you.
must have it somewhere.
Okay, so just as a bit of background, there's been 3 phases to the reform. So phase 1's already done, that was repealing the previous government's acts. Phase 2 we're still in, and phase 3 we're working on. When I say we, government, not us. So the government. So the first Resource Management Amendment Bill came into force in October last year. The second RMA bill is working its way through the system, and we expect that to be in force later this year. So they're delivering targeted changes to the Resource Management Act. The final phase is a replacement Resource Management Act, and this presentation is going to take you through what we can expect of that. Next. So there's going to be 2 acts, a Planning Act and a Natural Environment Act. The Planning Act will focus on land use planning to enable development and infrastructure. The Natural Environment Act will focus on use protection and enhancement of the natural environment. Each act will have its own set of national direction. The Planning Act will introduce nationally standardised planning zones. Now, our district plan already has incorporated the national planning standards, which includes standardised zones, so we shouldn't see too much change there. The Natural Environment Act will set environmental limits. Each region in the country will come up with a combined plan, and that will include a spatial plan, an environment chapter to regulate natural resource use, and a planning chapter to regulate land use, including those standardised zones. Porirua City will write the Porirua chapter of the new combined plan. In terms of compliance and enforcement, the new system will see a shift from focusing on consenting before works are undertaken to strengthening compliance monitoring and enforcement after the activity has been established. A new national compliance and enforcement regulator will be set up. This will provide more consistency and reduce variability in the compliance and enforcement activities. This also means that compliance and enforcement functions will be taken out of local government. A separate process will be set up. It's not part of the 2 proposed acts there, and the government hasn't provided us a timeframe or any more detail than that. And then finally, a new planning tribunal will be established for low-cost dispute resolutions, lessening the reliance on the courts. This is a very busy slide, providing even more detail to the previous slide, showing the roles and responsibilities of the main players. I won't go through it in detail now, you have that yourselves, but the red colouring will help, is what we're charged with doing. So we will help develop the spatial plan for the region. We will develop our own planning chapter for Porirua, and we will still have a consenting role. As mentioned before, though, the compliance, monitoring and enforcement will eventually be taken out of local government to a new centralised entity.
And that's where you've got regional council and the territorial authorities, and we hear they may go. So you're saying both of those will go from there to the new authority?
We still expect there will be a regional council and and territorial authorities.
Okay.
But it's the planning document that will be changed, so there will be a combined plan.
Thank
So
you.
we'll need to work together, yeah, more than we already do, maybe. So this is the national direction under each act that we're expecting to be seen. So just 3 for under each act. The next slide identifies some possible implications for our city. So in terms of iwi, potentially the iwi relationship impact, there might be a potential iwi relationship impact if the Treaty of Waitangi is not considered. And I'll go into more detail on the next slide on that. For planning policy, like I've said, we'll be developing a new combined spatial plan and we will be responsible for the Porirua chapter. In terms of resource consents, we expect that there will likely be fewer resource consent applications given more national standards, more permitted activities, and the reduced scope of effects being regulated, all of which are in line with that presumption that a land use is enabled unless there is significant enough impact on either the ability of others to use their own land or on the natural environment. So a much greater focus on property rights and providing more certainty for applicants. Also to note, the new system is likely to result in changes in the role of local government, which, if progressed, could have wider implications for the structure of local government in New Zealand. The Minister of Local Government and the Minister of the RMA Reform are working through these issues, and a further update is expected later this year. So in terms of Treaty of Waitangi, what's been indicated is that there will be no generic treaty clause that says that the Act must give effect to or take account of the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. Instead, the government's intent is that there will be a descriptive clause that will recognise the Treaty of Waitangi and the uniqueness of the settlements entered into the iwi by the Crown, with the Crown. That's all we've sort of been told at this point.
Yep.
I mentioned before national direction. The government is currently consulting on the above national direction documents. So that involves some new national direction documents, so national policy statements as we know them, and some amendments to existing national direction. Officers are currently reviewing the consultation material and will be reported to TPK in July. Also, since writing my report, we have received a discussion document on the Going for Housing Growth consultation. Officers are currently working through that material and will also report back to you on that. So my final slide is the next steps and sort of the timeframes that the government is working to. Like I've just mentioned, right now officers are working through that national direction consultation and the Going for Housing Growth discussion document. In late 2025, the Planning Act and the Natural Environment Act will be introduced to Parliament. Mid next year, the two acts will be enacted, and the government wants us implementing the new system in 2027.
Thank you. Councillor Hayward has a question.
Thank you, Vanessa and Helen. I can understand the whiplash that can come from the amount of work that central government is doing in this space and trying to provide some clarity to us as councillors. So thank you for your attempts at that. I have a few questions I'll go through.
Yep.
The first one is, should we also be mindful of what is the implications of the regulatory standards bill, if passed as is, with regards to the role of local government in its consent making powers?
Yes, there may well be some implications there. We're actually talking with Ngāti Toa at the moment about that because they're just working on a submission. For us, we're just trying to give you an update on what's happening in the RM system at the moment, which this information is based solely on a speech that was given by Chris Bishop. So we don't have any more detail than that, actually. Yep. So these things may change a bit.
Thank you. Hence why I said that it is difficult to ascertain context in this moment, and that these do seem to be rather tremendous changes. This brings me to my next question, and it is about trying to understand whether these changes what parts of them are evolutionary and what parts of them are revolutionary. RMA has been amended 12 times since 1991. Well, this is going to be the 12th time it's going to be amended since 1991. And I'm trying to understand, in particular, if we go back to the slide around the rather verbose table, that one there, regards to the spatial planning stuff. Now, the previous or the current legislation has talked about regional spatial planning, and that the responsibility of councils to work together to deliver that. How much different is this legislation to that legislation in that regard? Is it just exactly the same, new boss, same as the old boss?
We don't know. Sorry.
That's all right.
We don't know because there has been no detail to flesh out that part of the proposal, none whatsoever.
Okay. In which case, I think I have questions that you're probably going to give the same answer to. So perhaps maybe I should take these, give these as reflections based on your observation that might be something that as officers you may want to follow up as we go further through the process. So that one was the spatial planning. For me, I reflect on the power of us to work regionally around some of those big pieces of infrastructure, certainly around solid waste minimisation, that we are going to need to find sites that are suitable, that won't necessarily sit inside Aotearoa here as an individual council. We have to work collaboratively on that. I think spatial planning is where you would do that kind of corridor. The next one is back in 2009, the amendment then introduced the EPA. I'm trying to understand this idea of a new enforcement agency. What the hell happens to the EPA? Because they are supposed to be one of, under the current regime, monitoring and enforcement agencies responsible under the RMA. Might want to get some clarity around that.
I can probably give a comment on that. So Vanessa and I were at the New Zealand Planning Institute conference, and the Ministry for the Environment did talk at that. And from that talk, we understood that the new enforcement agency is going to have a very similar name to the EPA, if not the exact same name. So that may, allude to the fact that they might be very similar, but take on the solely be responsible for enforcement at a local level, which at the moment is us. But that's, that was what was said at the conference. Whether the government and officials change their mind about that as it goes through, I can't speak to that.
Thank you, and appreciate the additional clarity there. Sincerely, the last one I have is just with regards to the devolution of those enforcement and monitoring powers by local authorities being granted to a new nationwide agency. One of the concerns I would see is the disconnect between the consenting agency and the enforcement body being able to actually communicate effectively with each other in terms of what is actually reasonable or capable in terms of any application for a consent to be effectively monitored. If it becomes unworkable in terms of a consent and its ability to be monitored, then it shouldn't really have gone in that direction from a consent issuing panel. So at least you have some purchase in that when you are also the enforcer as well as the issuing body. So again, I don't ask you for any comment on it. I just think that that's a reflection that we will need more clarity around that as well. That's it. Kia ora.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yep, Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, look, thanks for all this. It's great. And I mean, it's all in a state of flux, yeah? So what I can't help but wonder, do we look overseas to see what's happening? Like I went through Scandinavia recently, and it's really impressive how they handle these things over there. Are we just sort of pathfinders in this and coming up with this legislation, or are we using overseas examples?
Might like to ask the government.
Well, we're smiling to ourselves because Mr. Bishop keeps on referring to Japan as having 13 standardised zones across the country, and we've got 32 or something like that in New Zealand, something like that, wasn't it? It was in the 30s. So from that we can infer that the Ministry for the Environment is definitely looking overseas, but that's all I know. Do you know anything more about that?
Well, at the planning conference, they did mention that they've looked at South Australia as good examples, and also the UK and London.
Thank you. Any other questions from anyone? Okay, thank you for that update, ladies. We are going to go offline now.